Viewers, in our break, we've been talking about you. How is it that the finance minister can help you? Navika, you have certain suggestions.
No,
you have a quibble over the tax.
I'm only talking about that at the end of the day, growth, great, fiscal discipline, great, manufacturing sector, great. Let's all, all of that, health of the economy is fine. But at the end of the day, we all go home. We don't live in our offices. We actually go home and, it's the kitchen. It's the expenditure at home that we need to worry about. And are we going to see something easing up for us? The debate also is about corporate tax at 25%, personal income tax at 40-odd% at
cases,
the highest rate.
43.
With a surcharge. And then the tax base hasn't grown. It's the same 2 crore people who keep financing everything which is, the part of the budget, subsidies. And they've been, base hasn't really increased. So let's get on to that debate at this moment. And let me get in Monica Hallan. Monica, the tax base hasn't grown. We had heard promises about the tax structure being simplified, compliance being made easy, all of that. But have we actually increased and widened the tax base? Has that happened at all or not in the last 5 to 10 years?
Navika, there is evidence that there are more people coming in and paying taxes, but the sort of drive which is required to get a much wider number of people to start paying taxes, that we have not seen. And this is not something that only this government has struggled with. Governments over the years, over decades, have tried to get people to pay their taxes. Whether it was a 1/6 scheme, if you have your if you're doing expenditure on certain things of a certain amount, then you have to at least file your tax returns. The government has now access to big data through the Aadhaar, PAN, bank account connection. They are much better able to detect undue flows of income, of money coming into bank accounts and per PAN.
Right.
I think they need to use that data to go after the people who are not still paying taxes. So I agree with you that it really hurts for veteran taxpayers, Navika, like you and me, that you go to the market, you go to a store, and you're paying with your card, and somebody comes and has a wad of cash, 50,000 rupees. Who carries that kind of cash? Only somebody who has not paid tax on that amount. They already are starting at a 30% advantage to me. This is just unfair. So they will have to do something to make it more equitable for all of us who have been paying taxes.
Mr.
And
Bala,
this, I think, is work in progress. We need to push further
Make it
on
equitable.
that.
Yeah, and despite demo, those wads of cash still exist.
Yeah.
Look, I think, we need to properly understand. Sorry, I'm always trying to say, just look at the data. One statistic that keeps coming up is that only 3% of Indians pay tax. Okay, I'm not saying you used it, somebody, but this will come up. Now, it turns out that if you look at the income distribution of India and our tax base, there are only about 120 million who are eligible to pay tax. And out of that, I think we've now, from a 15% compliance rate back in 2004-05, we are now up to about 55-60% compliance rate. We still have to go further. In the US, after everything done, they reach a peak of 82. No more than 82% of those who should pay tax in the US. In India, that number, as I said, has tripled over the last 15 years. We still need to go further. So one way is to expand the tax base, as you were correctly asking, and that is that you start targeting or start having tax base at 2.5, 3, and allow agriculture. We need to change the constitution for that, but I think an approach should be made that agricultural income is just like any other income, should be taxed. It was in the olden days.
But a government that does a somersault on
Zafar
three
Islam
farmers,
हो सकता है इस देश में
हो सकता
किसानों
है।
के नाम पर you brought in the
सड़क पे आ
reform
जाएंगे सब
bills,
लोग।
1 year of Kisans on the road and you had to take it back. Do you
Yeah.
think Kisans and agriculture can ever be taxed? Because actually it's not taxing Kisans, it's actually taxing the rich guys who have the big land holding.
Navika, this is a very contagious issue. It needs to be discussed on
No,
a wider
contagious
platform.
or
Contentious.
Contentious.
Issue. So, and needs to be
Contagious, I wish.
No, contentious issue. It
Because then
needs
everyone
to be
will
discussed on
be
a wider
taxed.
platform, and a lot of people need to be
No, but
convinced
Mr.
about
Islam,
it.
come on, let's be
But
honest.
away from
Someone
that, let
was
me just
saying
complete.
here, someone was saying here, and I
let
think
me
it was
just
Gautam Chikarmane in the break, and you were saying that, look, why should somebody who is a professional, a doctor, etc., be paying a tax and the rich farmer being completely sort of out of the sort of scope and ambit?
But Rahul, let me just complete. See, in terms of, as Mr. Bhalla was rightly saying, that tax base has improved in terms of number of people who are filing returns. Now it's around 7 crore people who are filing returns, and the actual taxpayers are 1.5 crore.
Right.
So that number should improve. That number should go up, and those
that's
who
not
are
enough.
eligible,
Surely it's not
those who are eligible, they must pay tax before even talking about the farmers, the high-income
No,
farmers.
but why?
should
Why
start
shouldn't we
paying
talk about the farmers? Yes.
No, they must pay taxes, one part
Yeah,
of the
I mean,
story.
that's-
But Sumit Singhania, partner at Deloitte, I want to ask you, they must pay tax? Okay, sounds good. But they don't.
Right, so Navika, a lot has been said about, Mr. Bhalla, I agree with you that there is a base that is eligible to pay tax in the first place, and only so many percentage of that base is currently paying tax. The ease of compliance over the last 6 or 7 years that we have seen, that has literally tripled that percentage of the taxpayer who is filing return. To put some statistics in the perspective, we have 120 million people, you said, who are eligible to pay. Today, 67 million tax return were filed in the last cycle of the tax compliance. If you see a very stark reality of that, close to 58% of those tax filers are actually salaried class, right? Yeah. So that's the gap, right? So you still have only 30% or 35% non-salaried people paying taxes. Whether one class we're talking about the farmers, the other is about what about the rich non-farmers, the businessmen, right? We talked about people going to shopping mall with cash. That's not just a symptom, right? The real problem is that is there a voluntary compliance that's being encouraged? And that's where I bring the point about one is to really drive the number of tax filers by reducing the tax rates and so on and so forth. But what the government needs to also focus on is ease of compliance, right? How does the government really
Mr. N.K. Singh, let me bring you in here. The government's tried everything to get people to be more transparent, etc. They've tried everything. Demo was also sort of tried towards that end. Hasn't really succeeded. Perhaps the time has come to lower taxes all across. Maybe just have one standard tax above a certain limit of income. Mr. Singh, is it possible? And bring in the farmers too. Possible at all?
Well, let me make 3 brief comments. First, I think there is a contradiction, namely that every successive budget, people expect that the threshold of exemption will go up.
Right.
And with this happening, millions of people go out of the tax net.
Sure.
At the same time, then we worry about a lower tax base. I think that the right approach would be not to really increase the threshold of exemption anymore, but those people who deserve support should be done through other means, not through the instrument of taxation, because otherwise the base will continue to be a minuscule one. On agricultural income tax, I entirely agree that it requires a constitutional amendment. It is a very sensitive issue. If you recall, and public memory is very short, you recall that I was the Revenue Secretary when I had started the 1/6 scheme, and that 1/6 scheme was applicable for the economy as a whole, namely anyone who had a certain consumption, a car, X, Y, Z, some criteria, and this was an indirect way of really bringing the ambit of rich farmers within the taxation network without really creating this crusade against taxing the farming sector, on which I agree that any consensus would be more difficult. Third, I think I entirely agree with the comments made earlier that given the fact that we have much greater information now, not only through Aadhaar, but in terms of the coverage under the GST, we are in a much better position to improve the tax base and the quality of tax compliance on the direct taxes as well, which will be the perfect synergy between direct and indirect taxes, adding to the tax buoyancy as a whole and improving our tax GDP ratio.
Okay, Ms. Hallan wants to come in. Yes, Ms. Hallan, go ahead, please.
Rahul, a very simple suggestion which is not going to be liked by a lot of people. Anyone who's spending more than 20,000 rupees in cash needs to give their PAN number. It needs to be recorded. I'm not saying do anything about it, just start recording who is spending more than 20,000 rupees in cash. We are spending 5 rupees using QR codes on our phones. It's all digitized. Why are people carrying cash to Apple stores, to H&M, to all these stores and weighing in bags of cash? Just start recording the PAN numbers of people who carry cash. That's
okay.
it.
Interesting. We'll
It's
take a very short break.
50,000. She wants it
Yeah,
to come down to 20,000.
Well, good. Maybe that's the answer. Short break, and I want Dr. Panagriya to come in then on this important issue, as well as Rajiv Mantri and Gautam Chukarmani. Let's just take a very quick break.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. 9 minutes and 55 seconds to the finance minister presenting her budget in the Lok Sabha. The cabinet meeting is just about rounding up and the proposals would have been shared with the cabinet colleagues by the finance minister, the prime minister chairing that meeting. So we'll know just in about 9.5 minutes what's there in the budget for each one of us. But the real issue here that people of India are interested in, of course they're interested in the health of the economy, but they're also interested in why in this country are corporate tax rates at 25% and personal tax rates at 42% at the highest level, when only 1.5 crore people pay taxes out of a base of 135 crore population in this country. I want an answer to this, and Mr. Arvind Panagariya, I want to come across to you to understand this, because that's what middle classes want to know.
Right. So, look, one point, 2 points here. One, I want to repeat what Mr. N.K. Singh said, that you can't let this standard deduction keep rising, because then you are basically taking out the taxpayers from the tax net progressively. So there has to be some discipline imposed on that. Now, the other point really is that I think economists, there's a good principle of taxation, that there should be horizontal equity in taxation. What that means is that, if two people have the same income, their tax liability ought to be the same. It should not depend on how the person spends the income or how the person earns the income. Exactly. Tax liability should be based on income, regardless of how it is spent or how it is earned. What we have done is, through these exemptions all around, very much made the tax liability the function of how you spend it or how you earn it. That is where I think exemptions should be eliminated, and then you can bring down the tax rates. We have already seen with the corporate profit tax, when you ended the exemption, reduced the tax rates, tax revenue has gone up. They have not fallen. A significant increase. And I am convinced that if we were to actually eliminate exemptions, bring down the tax rates, more people will pay taxes, because when the taxpayer sees that it is fair taxation, then they are willing to pay. But when they see that, look, what is my incentive to work if 43, 44% of my income, any extra rupee that I earn gets taxed away? It disincentivizes work, or it incentivizes cheating. So I think, this kind of reform is entirely possible. We have done it in corporate profit tax. It should be done in the personal income
It
taxation.
should be done.
as well.
Will it be done, Sumit?
Yeah.
I just add one line to this.
Yes.
Just one line. I know many people want to say.
No.
What you are effectively doing through this tax policy, where a company pays 25 and an individual pays 42 at the marginal rate, is that you set up your business in India, but you file your returns in Singapore.
Or
That's
Dubai?
what's happening.
That's that, or Dubai, or anywhere else where the tax regime is. So at an individual level, all the income I earn, you want me to leave this country, go somewhere, establish base somewhere else, pay my taxes in that jurisdiction rather than in India, even though I'm making money in India from company in India through consumers of India. I think this anomaly is deeper than just a number.
Or become a consultant instead and pay a consultant fee as
But as a
and
consultant,
become a
your
company,
income
you're
would be
not
the
an
same.
individual.
So, no, even as a consultant, the income tax that you would pay as an individual will be 42. So I think the only way is to emigrate, leave, go outside, run your business here,
Which is what
maybe
is
as an
happening
NRI.
increasingly.
Maybe as an NRI.
So Zafar Islam answered that point. You want us all to go out?
No, I think time has come for some rationalization in direct tax, and I'm sure that government is definitely contemplating when is the right time to do it.
No, but
People are
sir,
expecting-
you're talking about sensitivity, because vote bank, let's be honest, what is the sensitivity? The farmers have advocacy right groups, they have people who will champion their cause, they will forcibly occupy a road, and then you will go back on reforms. So, I'm sorry, sir, but this
No, but
comes down
this is
to
another
not
reform.
having...
Yeah,
This is another-
middle
another reform.
classes
Now,
don't
this is-
have a
They don't
lobby.
have-
They don't have a
lobby. They're
pressure
not
group,
organized.
and they won't sit on the
They
street.
can't lay siege.
And they are law-abiding citizens. So
If I may just come in for 1 minute. I think there are 2 or 3 distinct points, right? One is, look at the salaried class taxpayer, right? They are probably the highest compliant in terms of percentage, right?
Of course.
There has to be special tax regime for that salaried class. That point is, to my mind, indisputed, right? There is a strong case to argue that the limits of ATC, which is for the long-term savings around PPF and LIC contribution, all of that has to go up. I mean, it has been there for like 20 years, till the time I've been earning income that was 1.5 lakh rupees, it continues to be that. If somebody wants to contribute more for the long-term saving, that should be incentivized. If somebody wants to borrow money for the foreign education, that should be incentivized. You can't have a limited deduction for paying that kind of money, right? Last year there was this benefit of the, if you have to buy electric car, that is being, there was incentive, take away all the.
And the other, if you really want some progressivity, is 10% and 20%. End of story.
End of story.
The more slabs you create, the more exemptions you create, the more distortions you create, the more corruption you create. Sara kuch. It keeps accountants in business. We are not, the macro policy should not be to keep accountants in business.
or lawyers.
Yes.
So when the
Or lawyers.
rate was raised to the 43-44% level in 2019, at that time the FM had mentioned that we will relook this in the 75th year.
Yeah.
So some of us have been saying,
75th year is
Yes.
upon us.
Some of us have been saying that it's
the
time for
time is
relook.
now.
But
the
having said
time
that,
is now. On times now,
Seize the
we
moment.
demand that this
To
be
fair,
looked at.
We had the 3 years
yes, of course,
COVID.
sure.
But yes, now is the time.
It is time.
Well,
One question that you ask, why should individual taxpayer pay the highest tax of 43% versus a company paying 25%? That's absolutely a raging debate. There has to be a parity.
Yeah.
And more
That's
than
horizontal.
yeah, and that horizontal equity.
Well, we're expecting some stuff today, viewers.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, we're expecting. At least that's what we've been
When
reporting.
we say 43%, we are
Yeah.
talking about those who are earning above 5 crores a year.
Yeah, that's true.
That's-
That is
that's-
true.
that's
That-
a-
they're high net
Yeah, in
worth
comparison
individuals
to
or whatever you want to
absolutely,
call
but
them.
it's time to take a quick round of what is the one big thing everybody expects from this budget, and we'll do that round in the run-up to the budget presentation. Arun Chawla, DG FICCI joining us. Arun Chawla, what's the one big announcement that you're looking forward to from the budget? Just one.
Well, while there are several things which one can say, But your answer can be put in a perspective that India as a nation has remained resilient despite the global headwinds due to government's continued thrust on reforms and supportive measures, even during the pandemic period. So by giving a push to digitization, the government has brought about a transformational change in the ease of doing business as well as in the tax systems. So this is of course reflected in the buoyancy that we are seeing today in the tax collections. And we are confident its efforts through the policy support and reforms in creating an enabling ecosystem for India's high and sustainable growth. Now, one major thing that of course we want to see is that the continued thrust towards investment and growth by incurring expenditure on capital, physical, social, digital, improving India's competitiveness to be global manufacturing hub. The PLI schemes are excellent initiative, and government could consider extending the concessional tax regime for manufacturing operations, new manufacturing operations for at least 5 years, which is currently only up to March 31st, 2024. So this will ensure stability, certainty, and bolster the confidence of the investors to set up manufacturing units in India.
Well, Monica Hallan, for personal, for household and personal incomes, what's your one big prediction of what will be in the budget?
Navika, I'll take a longer term view. For households, the best thing the government can do is not to change course right now. There is a momentum gathering in the economy. Do nothing to prevent a move from the third gear to the fourth and then the fifth, because that is the wave which is going to lift all the boats. Do not go for short-term measures. Keep the focus.
All right. Over to the Lok Sabha.